Good morning and good afternoon to you two. How you doing, Ahmed and James?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. Doing well.
Doing well, Reed. Good to see you.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And at least James, to you, hopefully you had a fruitful MVP summit, and Ahmed, to you, hopefully we get to see you there sometime in the near future as well, if all things work out.
Yep.
Exactly.
Good stuff. And I won't be able to make it to FabCon next week, but I hear there's lots of good news coming from that as well.
Yeah, there were certainly some fun announcements and everything. It's one of those where like I get at least half of them. I'll have to be missing FabCon this year, but I got to see most of the people that I would have wanted to see there, at least here locally at the MVP Summit. So it has been nice to just have an annual catch up with a lot of good friends from pretty much around the world, which is always fun.
Yep. And right there in your own backyard, that's got to be nice and convenient.
Exactly. When I do capacity, it's fun being able to play host because I, at least know all the local spots and everything. So I usually get to take people out to some of my favorite restaurants and bars and everything else. So it's nice to be able to show people why I appreciate the Seattle area. We already have people excited about the spicy conversations. Donald Parrish is it's all about the fight in the chats. We will be getting to that, but you got to have the warm up, and a little bit of the pillow talk before you get to that. So
right. Before the pillow fight, yeah.
Before the pillow fight, you need the pillow talk. But I've interacted with both of you in separate capacities over the year, but this is the first time since you guys have started doing the drill down, which is your podcast that has been going on for 6 to 8 months now, around.
Yeah, 3, 4 months.
Started in January.
Yeah, we started back in the beginning.
Okay, no, yeah, less than that then. Yep. Yeah, okay, nice.
Yep.
If you want, let's I'll start Ahmed with you and then go over to James. Let's first do just a quick little introduction for those who aren't familiar with you on the channel, with each of you, and then talk about the podcast that you guys do as well. So start with you, Ahmed.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Ahmed. I have my own consulting company here in Vancouver, so not too far from Seattle, on the West Coast as well. And I come from a background of being in the healthcare industry for a number of years. So I worked for a lot of the provincial health authorities, as well as the local Ministry of Health as well. And then I kind of stepped out into the consulting space, doing Power BI consulting and training for a lot of corporate organizations. And I've been doing that now for 3 years. And then, so that's kind of been my journey in the Power BI space. And then James and I connected some time ago and been in touch, and so that sort of led to the creation of the drill down. But I'll save that for a little bit later. I'll let James talk about the drill down.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Over to you, James.
Cool. James Bartlett here. I have been working in BI for a little over 6 years now. Until very recently, I was working in healthcare education for Des Moines University, and I actually just recently accepted a position as a consultant, principal consultant with P3 Adaptive, and I'll be starting there next week. So, or I should say,
my old stomping grounds.
Week after next. Yeah. Oh, I didn't. You used to work there?
It's my very last company I ever worked with before I went fully independent. Yeah.
Cool.
Worked my way up to principal consultant there with Rob like 10 years ago. Worked there for a couple of years, and then hop ship and started running my own business. Yeah, like Nar and a bunch of others that work there. A few of them will have been individuals that have worked with me, and then the other MVP, Kristen.
2 other MVPs that I know of. Yeah, Kristen and Ed.
Oh, and Ed, yeah, Ed and I go quite a ways back, and Kristen and I hung out a lot during the MVP Summit, and she's fantastic. So you're with good people. It's a good company.
Awesome. Yeah, that was the vibe I got, and it seemed like an opportunity for me to continue growing my skills. As much as I love the organization I've been working with at Des Moines University, and I love all the people there, there's just only so much growth you can do in an organization that that's limited in scope like that. And I felt like the team that I was leading there, basically all the people on my team had all the skills necessary to continue going on without me. And I thought, you know what? All right, I'll let them step up to the plate and start hitting their own home runs, and then I'll go off and do some my own stuff. So
And I think I've seen a lot of people kind of take a similar journey over the years with either figuring out like do they want to stay fully independent, do they want to work for a shop that's independent, or the Chris Webbs and a few others that end up like say kind of going out around the mothership and then back into it
Right.
with work, or like Ray Romano or a few others where you just realize you can make more change internally than externally.
Right.
But it's always enjoyable to watch different people's journeys and see where they end up landing that fits the best with them with whatever their career puzzle is trying to be put together as.
Yeah. And this is it's kind of interesting because my wife and I, we've been running a consulting company of our own for a few years now, and doing little contracts here and there, nothing like meat and potatoes kind of scope, but it's been fun doing that, and I realized while doing that, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I like doing these, where every new thing that I get into is just a completely different style of something that I've been working with before. I get to learn new technologies and stuff like that. So that was kind of part of what spurred me to go that direction. And so that then, of course, to introduce the drill down a little bit, Ahmad and I, we've been corresponding on LinkedIn for, I don't know, a couple of years now. And after a while, we just kept commenting on each other's stuff, and we started talking, privately. And it's like, wow, we probably ought to like do something together at some point here. And so that was where the drill down came from. And yeah, we try to put up a live stream on LinkedIn every other week. We had a little bit of a lull recently because of MVP Summit and Fabric Con, and of course prepping for this session here. So, but we aim to come back next week.
And the how many better said is the kind of the topics that you have queued forward? Is this something that you come up with like a few days, a few weeks, a few months beforehand? Do you have like a queue of ideas, or how's that process go for what to talk about during any of those episodes?
You want to field this one?
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of like we're early days right now. So we kind of started off with a couple of really like ideas that people have been talking about a lot, and they wanted some clarification on. So Git integration and for Fabric was a big topic. So we kind of approached that as our first topic. We've got some things coming up as well. It kind of we want to get it to the point where it's kind of community driven and sort of crowdsourced as well. So if we're hearing from individuals in the community that there's a particular area that they just feel like they'd really like to go beyond just the default Microsoft Learn documentation and drill down into something, that's the idea of it. So yeah, we've got some of the things that come up through our individual endeavors, but we're hoping to get it to that point as well in the near future.
I like the ideas you said with community involvement a little bit. To kind of help both the topic, but I think the conversation remain inclusive and not just two people talking in a tunnel, right? with some of that stuff. Yeah, exactly. So the same principle that I have with some of these live streams is people can come on and like they might have done a topic they've presented 10 or 15 times, but I'm hoping through the interactions with myself and then just the chat, it still adds new flavor and hopefully new insights for people on that. But I've definitely learned, and the reason I asked about like the whole ideas thing is early on when I was doing getting started with videos and live streams, it was a lot harder to kind of like trying to milk water from a rock, so to speak, to come up with those ideas. And I almost started to learn how to recognize those ADHD thoughts that I get that like, wait, actually, that little epiphany that I just had, I need to jot that down. So I have a brain dump in OneNote it starts from this and eventually whittles down to this, which then becomes maybe like this many reasonable ideas that eventually becomes that many ideas that will become those. But I put down my thoughts a lot more than I used to, because I realized that if I actually just try to sit down and think about in the moment, what do I want to do? It will never come. But good ideas just randomly occur like as I'm driving or, at a conference or something. And so I got better at writing those down because I'm not good personally at being creative when I know I need to be creative versus having those light bulb moments.
Fair enough. I think I've got the same thing going on my phone too. I drop them in as like to do items, follow up on this idea. Yeah.
We have a WhatsApp chat between the two of us, and we're constantly just like one of us just like opens it up and just hits the voice recorder. It's like, all right, I got an idea. And then and we have a SharePoint folder where we keep everything for our
nice.
And so we've got like our slide decks in there. We've got our like video recordings of the ones we've done in the past, and then we have like a document where we're just keeping like notes for future stuff. So that's what we have right now. And we also have a GitHub repo where we have a discussion tab, And so we're encouraging people who want to hear us talk about certain topics to go in there and open a thread in the discussion and say, hey, here's a topic I'd like to hear you guys discuss. And so we have that as a way to bring other ideas in as well.
That's and I think as long as those continued conversations happen, and as you said, they either get recorded to something else. I know with Steve on my analytics endeavors things, we've definitely had a few discussions where like weekly, like, wait, we have like 5 really good things. What we're like, okay, well, if we name 3 of them, we should probably start writing these down a little bit. But thankfully, we have AI and Copilot to help with a lot of that. Like the stuff that's built into Teams, or I personally use Crisp. But like every meeting with permission, like it gets recorded and summarized, and it is the world's best note taker because I suck at talking and taking notes at the same time. It's very distracting to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah.
Digressions aside, and geek it out on, I would say like content creation and everything else, which I can talk about as its own separate subject. On the topic today of kind of focusing on the podcast, but then also the broader stroke conversation around fabric and some of the fights that have already been alluded to in the chat. Where would we like to aim the conversation initially?
Yeah, I think just that. I don't know. Would you? Let's go right into it. I'd say.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, this is the abstract that probably people have seen in some of the posts we put out promoting this live stream here. So really, just the idea is, hey, fabric is the, of course, it's the new shiny, and people are having all kinds of takes about it, positive and negative. And what we're here to do is to kind of dispel the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that have come from a certain sort of subset of the community, and really talk about how Power BI and Fabric really do fit together like puzzle pieces, and that they're not mismatched, and that people who have that perception are perhaps not looking at it from the right perspective or deeply enough to understand that how they're fitting together. So did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think like I kind of both James and myself were early adopters of Power BI. We were around in the early days when it wasn't the mature tool that it is today, and it didn't stop us from being champions in our own organizations at the time. And so I think Fabric comes as a new product to the environment. Yes, it's buggy, it doesn't have everything that we may have, it may want to be eventually in the future, but I think that there's merit to Fabric, and I think there's merit to merging and having Power BI sort of be embedded in that Fabric ecosystem. So I think that's where our previous experiences can really help shed some light on this conversation.
Yep. And of course we've got this is how growth is happening, and this doesn't actually have the date access on this, but I saw recently that we were at Reed and I were attending MVP Summit, and this same graph was shown on one of their presentations, and right around in here is where somewhere in this little range here is where Fabric came in. So it is really not slowed down at all. In fact, it just continues accelerating in terms of growth. So if there's anything that should tell you that that Fabric and Power BI do belong together, it's that, well, I mean, if it was really that big of a debacle, a disaster, you would think that usage would have dropped off, but it's actually just continued accelerating. So I think that's a the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Exactly. And like to your points too, is I think that is part of the goal of MVPs and others is to we're not the ones who are like yelling the quiet parts out loud, but we can at least vocalize the quieter parts out loud. I think more than maybe Microsoft can, and we're kind of a bridge between the two. We're not usually going to scream as loud as maybe necessarily the community, but we're going to try to provide some reasonable, rational vocalization of things that are wrong with it, and which things are actually mature enough to say use, which things are maybe you should wait 6 to 12 months before using this product. So it's like nothing's perfect with that. There's certainly plenty of sharp edges left with Fabric, but there's also a lot of really good applicability of streamlining, and like it is the future for the Microsoft platform. On they want to continue to discourage new stuff being built in certain parts of Azure and more stuff being built in Fabric as they add more features to it. So it's regardless of if you like it today or not, like it's if you're going to continue to use Microsoft products, it is something that you want to probably put yourself more and more familiar with, because
Yeah.
that's where continued innovation, development, and everything else for a BI ecosystem is going to be put all the time and effort into.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. And this is actually what you said just now, Reed. That brings another point. It's like, it's not like most of the stuff in Fabric is even that new. Like, a lot of the stuff that's in Fabric is stuff that's been available in like Azure Synapse and just in the Azure side of things already. You know, like, we're now getting things like the Azure SQL DB or not Azure Fabric SQL DB, which is, I mean, that's basically Azure SQL DB, but it's now been brought into a place where Power BI can access it directly, and people who are building stuff in Power BI workspaces can actually just build their database right alongside their semantic model. It's not like it's brand new. Most of the stuff that's there is stuff that Microsoft's been working on for a long time. It's just now they've said, okay, let's make it so you can do all of it in one place, and they're breaking down the barriers that are preventing people from getting stuff done. And I think that's again another point to score. It's like, anytime that the business can break down, or that the business has the opportunity to tear down the barriers between their data engineers and their data analysts, and maybe have them all working together in one place, basically is just getting the bureaucracy out of the way and getting the work done. So
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect example of why Fabric and Power BI belong together.
Yeah, I think too, like for me, if like this slide here kind of talks a little bit about how Power BI has already been embedded in other Microsoft products, right, or ecosystems, if you will, whether it's Power Platform or it's Microsoft 365. I mean, there was no complaints with it being core to, or a core piece to those ecosystems, and now being part of the Fabric ecosystem, it just leans into another sort of side of that of the business's needs, right? And I think I think maybe maybe my capitalist mind will kind of maybe offer, like, the way I think about this is, my Power BI had a lot of interest from various organizations, to the slide we had up just before, right? Lots of growth with Power BI, lots of uptake, lots of usage. I mean, they surpassed Tableau in a number of years in terms of, like, being one of the most widely used tools, depending on where you are in the world. But I think that it's a business opportunity too, right? I think if you look at it that way, where Power BI is working for you, and people are obviously leaning into it. So why not sort of build more structure around what already works, right? So I think Fabric is kind of just a logical business decision as to expanding that sort of analytical ecosystem. So yeah.
Well, and even to this one, I remember the kind of the way they describe it is that Power BI is the thing that ties the business users and Office universe together with essentially the backend data DBA and more data platform universe that would come from essentially one link between the two of them.
Yeah, certainly.
Yep. And
this semantic models everywhere.
Yep.
Exactly.
I mean, Power BI being part of the data platform, I mean, which it has been since I don't know, basically since inception, right? Why wouldn't all of the products that are in the data platform be integrated together functionally, in addition to organizationally? That makes the most sense to me. I mean, they should all be together in as many ways as possible. Obviously, there's going to be some degree of separation between them. Got different product teams working on them at Microsoft and that sort of thing. But as much as possible, integration works in the favor of the users in the business, and the easier it is to get things connected to each other, and the easier it is to build them together, the more likely you are to be able to come up with solutions that move the needle faster. So why not? So we'll move on forward here.
Yeah, maybe I'll take this one, James. Like I think, yeah. So for me, like the way I look at Fabric and Power BI is I see that Fabric is not in competition to replace Power BI. I think if anyone has that impression, I think they maybe missed the mark in terms of what it actually was advertised to do. To me, Power BI Fabric is really an extension and an enhancement on what already is there in Power BI. And I think at the end of this, like the message that me and James really wanted to do is, even if we're not able to convince you to come over to the Fabric side, you still can use Power BI independently. Like you're not completely removed from what already was there before. Right. But yeah, I mean, you just get more tools instead of having just data flows and and the various pieces that existed in the Power BI ecosystem. Now you have notebooks. Now you have other features. You have the ability to do direct lake or SQL endpoint. You have the ability to build lakehouses. And from being in organizations, a lot of my past experience being in organizations where you really were only limited to sort of the BI side of analytics. Now you have a much wider cast to do a lot more analytical stuff in the storage layer, in the ingestion layer that you just didn't have access to before. So I don't see it as a replacement. Yeah.
Yep. That's great.
Well,
I actually have a.
thankfully it's
Oh,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to mention like just do your thing, and like honestly that it's the idea that one of the biggest things that's come out with just the idea of Fabric is semantic link that was released last year, and that, I mean, essentially it turns within the ecosystem, the semantic model, which was previously just essentially an endpoint just for a report. Like it didn't really go much further than that, but now your data from your semantic layer could be easily used with engineering or anything else like that. So, or just further analysis of model metadata usage, the heat meter, whatever you can get like per column. So just the sheer plethora of additional things you could do about model usage or model data itself, I think has been really cool in a broader like BI story with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a bit of an analogy I wanted to bring up, and that is that recently, within the last year or so, there was a fiber internet provider in my area that came through and started just installing basically the hookups in people's backyards, all through the neighborhood to make it possible for their houses to get fiber, all the way to the house, which is like, I'm not upgrading because I've got a great deal with my current provider, but it's kind of, I like the fact that I have that option now. And even though like it was a bit of an inconvenience for me at first, I was like, I kept letting these techs in through my gate to like get to the box in the backyard, and I'm not using it right away. I do recognize the fact that that does provide value for me potentially for the future, or for the future homeowner, if I sell my house. So I think of it that way. It's like, even if you're not using it right away, you ought to be aware of the fact that this ability to expand is going to be good for your organization, regardless of whether you want to use it now. It gives you a lot of opportunities to branch out if necessary.
Well, at the end of the day, it's still a workspace. There's just new items that are that are available now in it. Exactly. You just have a bigger universe of tools in your toolbox. 100%.
Yep,
definitely.
So speaking of that, this I think is a great illustration of how similar the I guess you could say the personas of a Power BI analyst versus a Fabric analyst. There's so much overlap here. There's very, very little difference. The only thing that's different is that the Fabric analyst has more capabilities. It's not like there's nothing that's been taken away. It's just how now they have more options to expand. So we look at these various different levels here. At the plan and design phase, really, it's really just the direct lake that's been added. And
I think this was from Kurt and I's semantic model presentation last year. Yeah, because it was it's essentially like what was it? What Fabric can do to expand how you can leverage your semantic model. Essentially that. Yep.
Certainly. Yeah, but
he just a quick call out on just the fact that like nobody does I think like thought to visual translations better than Kurt on all that stuff. Again, I am there's an argument I feel like for at least some people where like, oh, give me enough time and I could probably do that. Like I could reproduce what Kurt does once I've seen a pattern that he does. Like, oh, that's a cool way to do something. I'm going to do that. But the coming up with them as well as he does, he's on his own level. To give him
he's the king of concept, I think. That's for sure.
I wish I could diagram as well as he did. You could do a master class on that.
Yep. Definitely. So yeah, Kurt, if you want to make some extra money, some of us will sign up if you want to do a master class on
and PowerPoint animations, cool animations in PowerPoint that then that animates in all the new crap that comes with these kind of things. Yeah, very pretty PowerPoints. Right. Digressions aside.
Yeah, so and we're going through the other items here. Your connect and transform. Used to be that you just had your semantic models and your data flows. Now you have data flow gen 2 and all this other stuff. Pipelines. I don't know if I recognize all the items here. Notebooks, warehouses. What's that one with the asterisk on it? I don't recognize that one.
I actually don't recognize that one. Yeah, that's Yeah.
But I mean, again, this is to point out the fact that they've introduced, for instance, Dataflow Gen 2. That doesn't make it so you can't use Dataflow Gen 1 anymore. At Des Moines University, we're still using Dataflow Gen 1 for almost everything. Yeah. And even though we have some a little bit of Fabric stuff going on, kind of making inroads there, it hasn't decreased the effectiveness of everything we were doing with the Gen 1 Dataflow. And that's still the way that almost everything is being run to this day. So again, it's not coming in and saying, oh, you can't do the way you've been doing already. I mean, if you didn't change anything at all, everything that you're doing today would still continue working the same way it was before they ever even announced Fabric.
Yeah,
there's nothing that's been actually removed feature wise. And actually, this brings something up that I think we had a comment from Greg earlier, and saying that that offering F64 SKU for the same price as P1, he was saying that Microsoft is admitting that Fabric has no value. I disagree. I think that
this one
coming in, yeah, exactly. I think that coming in and offering that that capability. I mean, it's that. We did say we're going to have hot takes today, so maybe Greg's coming in and trying to stir the pot, get people talking. So I appreciate that, Greg. But I think that Microsoft has always brought more things out without charging extra. Like when we just had P1, and we had they made it so that you could at first you only had P1, and then they were like, you can even do premium per user. For instance, at Des Moines University, we were able to save a lot of money by switching from P1 to PPU, and Microsoft didn't have to do that. They offered the same value for less money. So I think that this is just a thing that Microsoft does. Keep producing value, keep offering it to people at a price point that's attractive, and I think that this is basically an opportunity for Microsoft to try to say, hey, let's get everything under one roof and make it so that people can really build solutions that work together seamlessly. To me, that's a selling point right there. And from a business strategy perspective, if I were working at Microsoft, my thing with that is let's try to make it so they don't need to build all these solutions together from different building blocks from different places, from all these different providers, Snowflake and Databricks and DBT, and build this monstrosity thing that is kind of held together with duct tape and baling wire. I like the fact that there's all this that there's cohesion within the Fabric ecosystem together, and that it's all hey, if you have a problem with some of it, guess what? You have one person, one support ticket that you can open, and it should be, you can get it all answered from one place instead of having your two vendors pointing fingers at each other. So
exactly.
I think it was a good business decision too. I mean, Fabric is coming. It's new. It's the newer tool, right? And with new tools, there comes kinks, right? So if you can kind of, offer up something new without charging anything additional for it, I mean, it's a sensible decision, right? You're essentially asking, you're kind of betting on people's goodwill to try something out and not incur an additional cost. And I've been involved in some decisions too, with some of the clients I've worked with, where this is just it's almost like a no-brainer, right? Well, we get it for the same price. Why not experiment with it, right? And then once they tinker around with it a little bit, then they're sold, right? There are features there that makes more sense to actually leverage the ecosystem a little bit more.
And I do see, Donald just mentioning, and just in terms of cost and everything else, is an FPU license. That would be something that would be great to have sometime in the future as one of the remaining gaps, rather than needing a capacity as you get Fabric-like features, but on a shared capacity, which would probably be one of the last of the checkboxes they would need to do if they decide to go that route.
But there's already an idea for that out on the ideas forum. So I mean, if that's
I'm sure they're
that people
listening.
Are interested in, that's something I think I went and voted for it immediately as soon as I saw that someone had posted it. So the idea of a per user license is certainly attractive. And like I said, my prior organization, we were using that to the max. Basically everybody that uses Power BI had a PPU license, and it made a lot of sense. We saved a lot of money by doing it that way. So
exactly.
I think we could probably move on here. I think people probably get the idea here that every one of these things is really just adding something. It's not removing anything that was there before. It's just adding additional capabilities. And if you don't want to use them, guess what? You don't have to. All right. So this is a slightly different perspective here, kind of going the opposite direction. From the perspective of Power BI, there's nothing that's that you're doing now that you can't do if you switch to Fabric. So, but if you want, guess what? You can branch out. You can get into all of these other capabilities.
Yeah.
I don't know if my cursor is showing up here, but yeah, there we go.
Yeah, what Reed was saying, right? Now the workspace is still a workspace. You're just adding additional items to it, right? So you can still
Right.
do those traditional semantic models and reports like you had before. Nothing different. You still have those Power BI artifacts. Now you're just adding a lot more to what the workspace can do. If anything, now if anyone has managed or administered workspaces and know what that's all about, I mean, you sort of have an advantage now because you already understand that ecosystem and they're just piling more things in there. So it offers a good segue into that environment.
Yeah, like I'd much rather if I'm a Fabric tenant administrator. And previously, if I wanted to do stuff with like lakehouses and things like that, I had to actually learn a whole bunch of stuff about the Azure way of handling that kind of stuff with resource groups and like storage containers. I don't even know the names of all this stuff because that's not been my purview. No pun intended. But that's but now that it's under Fabric, I can actually do all that stuff under the same exact security, licensing, all that kind of stuff paradigm that I've been using for Power BI all along. So in a way, it's actually reduced the friction for me to bring in new features. Previously, if I wanted to bring in a lake house, I would have had to get it approved from the organization. I would have had to, like spin up the extra. Again, I don't know the terminology for all that because I've never been able to do it before, but now I can.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
It's essentially creating an instance which would have to be either attached to credits or any workloads or anything else in Azure. So yeah, like it is a lot more back end of a headache to flip a switch on for something for many of these things in the previous world.
Technically and organizationally, like there's the whole bureaucracy thing. Like, okay, well now that means we're going to get an extra bill. Nobody wants to have an extra bill, right? So having it all under Fabric now means we can get a single bill that has everything consolidated under one place, and we can actually more accurately predict how those how what we do is going to impact our bill.
Yeah. So. There's the other piece too is I think sometimes, like again, some of my experiences, the data storage layer, if you will, sometimes is managed by a separate department than say the BI team. So you have like the BI team, and then you have the IT team, and sometimes those groups don't always play nicely together. And so bringing in the Fabric environment into the BI side really expands what the BI team is able to do, independent of that larger sort of large enterprise IT department.
Absolutely.
Yep. I like Greggy B's comment just now. Reed, I don't know if you can throw that up on the screen here.
There you go. Yep. Fabric and premium pricing. Fabric is essentially a consumable model with CUs where you can choose what workloads you put towards where you put the CUs towards, and Microsoft says $5,000 of notebooks is approximately equal to $5,000 of models.
Yep. Or ETL or whatever, right? Like $5,000 of compute, whatever you want to use that compute on is totally your call.
You have one sandbox. Like you just do whatever you want in the sandbox. Build a sandcastle, build a townhouse. But you have a limited amount of sand in your sandbox unless you pay for more sand.
Right. Right. Totally agree. That's a great analogy.
Actually, I like that analogy. I mean, like you have so much sand, you can only build so many things with the sand before you run out of sand. Otherwise, you just buy more sand to fill the sandbox with.
Exactly. Love it. Just trademark that.
When they if you have an unused model that it gets ejected, that's the equivalent of a bullet coming up, kicks down your sandcastle, but then goes and builds another one next to it.
All right. You guys want to move on to the objection counterpoint? Here we go.
Let's do it.
All right. So one of the big objections that we were hearing from various different people on LinkedIn and other social media was that people were saying, "Oh, it's just a steep learning curve. People have been using Power BI. They're not going to understand Fabric. It's it's too complicated. They're not familiar with data engineering, cloud technologies, that kind of stuff." Ahmed, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of reflecting on my early days with Power BI, right? Like I was an avid Excel user. That's how I did most of the reporting. I was a business analyst, and so a big part of my job was reporting. And so I used Excel to drive a lot of that, and PowerPoint to create nice visuals and presentations. And then someone introduced me to Power BI, and it was like it was like a gateway, like the gateway drug into that space of like business intelligence. And so, you know, I learned about relational data modeling. I learned about ETL processes. I got to learn about, you know, data visualization. It expanded the horizon so much. So if anything, it kind of set me on the trajectory that I'm in today. So I think in the same way that Power BI was sort of a gateway for a lot of people into BI, like they were, you know, casual self-service BI users that eventually became developers. I think Fabric kind of presents the same opportunity too, right? You're sort of getting a gateway into the data engineering space, and you know, I'm sure many of you have heard of like the rise of the analytical or analytics engineers, right? Essentially, it's just a combination of those two, BI and engineering people, into sort of one persona. So yeah, I think that kind of is a good segue for a lot of people to learn about notebooks and to learn about lake houses and how that works too. So and any new idea is going to come with a challenge to learn it, but I think over time, you know, it becomes simpler and you become more accustomed to it. Yeah.
Yep.
And I know people kind of hate the idea of using traditional Azure individuals and people who build like proper enterprise pipelines, like cringe at the idea of using Power Query and data flows to ingest the stuff into it. But if you're in small to medium business and you want to get data processed and cleaned in a pipeline too, any type of engineering scenarios in Fabric, you can still basically use data flows Gen 2 to get it into there. So you have Power BI skills you can inherit over, which is a mix of old world and new world. You know, something truly enterprise would probably be like Python or SQL scripting, TSQL, PySpark, something like that. But for somebody dealing with a few million rows of data but wants to do additional engineering and science stuff on top of it, data flows Gen 2 works perfectly fine for that.
I'd call them Fabric training wheels. It's perfect for somebody who's coming over from something like, you could jump into Gen 2 data flow directly from building everything in Excel with Power Query there, and you could just copy your Power Query and just paste it into a Gen 2 data flow and you're off to the races. So I think in a lot of ways that is it really opens up possibilities. But again, it's the whole thing about like, hey, if you don't want to use it, nobody's forcing you to. You can continue using Dataflow Gen 1, or you don't even have to use data flows at all. You can keep just having your semantic models connect directly to the data source. Nothing's saying you have to use any of this stuff. So, and
it's a good stepping stone too. I would say like not too long ago, there was a client engagement I was involved with where we were setting up like, you know, a basic Fabric environment for them, right? There was smaller to medium sized business. They didn't really have the need to go and set up a huge, you know, enterprise BI team, but they needed tools beyond just, you know, connecting their semantic models directly to their ERP system, right? Because they were facing problems with that. And so, you know, we introduced the idea of Fabric to them and setting up a sort of I know people hate this, but the medallion architecture where we set up like a bronze and silver and gold layer, right, for them to ingest their data and transform it and load it. And so, you know, we use data flows Gen 2. They then saw, wow, that this was like really capable. We introduced them to notebooks, and then they saw that to be, you know, they saw their consumption again go a lot down, and their consumption of CUs, because notebooks are so much more efficient. So it was like, just like, you know, stepping little bit by little bit, where, you know, if you were to come in to sort of convince a business that this is, you know, this is the sort of end state, it's hard to do that unless you have like these stepping stones to get there. So I think it does. It provides that sort of gradual more complexity as you go sort of through the different Fabric pieces.
Yep. And speaking of stepping stones and sandboxes, I think that one of the things that Fabric is really great with is the fact that we now have these tiny little capacities that you can get, F2, F4, that kind of thing, that are from an organization standpoint, they're almost nothing in terms of money, but they offer an opportunity for someone who doesn't know anything about this stuff to learn about it in an almost risk-free environment, to basically just go in there, to dive in and just start blowing things up. Because guess what? If you just take that little F2 capacity and you just assign it to a team of devs, the worst thing they could possibly do is freeze it up for an afternoon, and then they come back the next day and they've got it back. And but it doesn't impact any of the production workloads, as long as you actually do keep separate capacities for that kind of stuff. You can really give people an opportunity to learn by doing. And I mean, I've talked about how learning by doing is like the best way to do it in other presentations. But that's I think anybody who wants to learn this kind of stuff, That's a great way to do it. And now that you have the opportunity to do so on a basically risk-free basis with these tiny little capacities where you can sort of, again, training wheels, use them, learn how the system works, and then after a while, it's like, hey, I've got a notebook here that uses almost no CUs, and I've tested it in lots of different ways. It seems to work really great. Let's go ahead and move that over to production. That's I think a great way to do things, and that wasn't possible before.
No. I think it's
Right,
perfect.
Not accidentally
Next,
charging yourself $5,000 when you turned on the wrong Azure instance is pretty nice.
Yeah. All right. Next objection we had here.
Yes.
Ahmed, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So this is a common one, right? So this is the one I think I hear about most on LinkedIn. And so a lot of the times that people talk about how the cost of adopting Fabric is very, very high. And I think there's some confusion around this one, because I would think it's the exact opposite of that. If you don't mind flipping to the next slide, James,
Sure.
This is where we kind of like Fabric introduces SKU levels that are much, a lower barrier entry point for Fabric environment, starting off at like what James was mentioning, the F2 SKU. Now, you don't have to go straight into F64. So in Power BI world, prior to Fabric, you sort of had, Power BI Pro, Power BI Premium per user. And then if you wanted to step up into those sort of enterprise solutions, you had to go and purchase a P1 SKU, which, I mean, for a small business that may be only paying, let's say, a couple of $100 or maybe a little bit under $1,000 for all their users and all their pro developers, it's a big step up to go from $1,000 a month to a $5,000 bill, right? For maybe a few enterprise solutions, maybe large data set modes or something that they don't necessarily have access to in their sort of default Power BI experience. So the fact that Fabric allows you to enter into that ecosystem at a lower point, it's starting off at F2, and you get all the features. You get lakehouses, you get data warehouses, you get the data flow Gen 2, you get all the core Fabric pieces.
XMLA.
Exactly. At an F2 SKU, and then and then as you were saying, Reed, if you need to increase the size of that sandbox to build more, you can do that now. You have the ability to go up into an F4 and an F8 and so on. You're not having to jump from a P1 to P2 and double your bill from 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000 and so on. So it's like it offers a little bit more of a stepwise way. I personally see this as I've had no problem convincing a CFO for a company to say, let's just try Fabric, an F2 SKU. It'll cost you $350 a month. Like that's it. It's a negligible. It's something you just write off. It's really not a big thing. Whereas I remember the days when I would have to go and talk to a client and say, well, now you're, it's premium. You can't do this without a premium SKU.
Yep.
And I'd be like, well, is it worth the additional $4,000 a month? Is it really worth it? And it's a hard sometimes justification to make unless you're like super into the data space and you can really appreciate those technical pieces. So I mean, I personally rolled out the Fabric now with a number of clients, and it's just it's easy peasy. There's really no steep convincing you have to do to get people to buy onto that.
Right. I think we may want to clarify with 350. That's Maple Leaf dollars, right?
Yeah. 51st state dollars.
Right. Oh no.
Exactly.
No!
Yeah.
So. No, it's Maple Leaf dollars. Yeah. I'm totally thinking of my Canadian dollars. I had to switch it over the other day because our conversion rate. So now $250 USD is a lot more against the Canadian dollar. So it's changed quite a bit lately. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll move on to one more here. I think we've got, and this is I think another sort of misunderstanding that people have. They're saying, oh, all of the Fabric features, they're all gate kept behind the Fabric Copilot, Git integration, other new features being hidden behind a Fabric paywall. It's like, well, let's think back a little ways. What was it like before Fabric came along? XMLA endpoints, could you use those without premium? No. There's the thing with incremental refresh. Could you use that without premium? No. We actually had Git integration with premium before Fabric came along. Could you use that without premium? No. So
I will argue at least the exception for incremental refresh makes 1,000% sense on why to move it down, because and sorry, getting over one sec. There we go. Okay. Getting over a little bit. So the incremental refresh was moved down to Pro specifically because it's a huge cost saver for Microsoft. If you refresh less data in their ecosystem, it saves them money on literal server things. So like that's one of those few where it's like I understand why they actually bumped it down to like a free Pro level. It's a win-win for everybody, which is a perfect world, right? Of a feature that like you can provide at no cost that literally saves you money.
Yeah, but at one point in the past, it was a premium only feature, and we've only scratched the surface. There were tons of things that are premium only. The ability to like connect inter workspace, I think one workspace to another, I believe, was premium only. Lots of things that are
viewers. Like if you had an organization that had maybe a small amount of developers, but you had a whole bunch of people viewing those reports, right? That was one of the ways that you were telling people like you just can't keep purchasing Pro license. It's going to cost you a lot more than if you were to buy the premium license. So
So the idea that Fabric is gatekeeping things is it's nothing new, I suppose. I mean, that like there are premium features that are behind a paywall on basically any service out there. Just name a service. If there's a free tier and like a Pro tier and a premium tier, there's always features that unlock at every one of those tiers. This is nothing new in Microsoft, and it's nothing new in software as a service. It's nothing new in
business
the history of retail.
It's the pricing ladder, right? It's the pricing
exactly.
ladder. You gradually take people up into that pricing ladder, and they have to kind of choose what's the right fit for them, right?
And that from another perspective, as a business, if you're not using advanced features, do you want to pay for the fact that there's somebody who's developing those features if you're not going to use them? No, right? Well, you'd want a tier that is priced accordingly so that you're not helping to pay for the development of solutions of features that you're not going to use. So I think it actually makes sense to have them tiered pricing like that, not just from Microsoft's perspective, but from the perspective of organizations that are using those, because you want to pay the least amount you can for the services you're going to get. And if you decide, hey, I need to use more features, you're probably going to recognize that that's going to provide value to your organization. And what is that value worth to you? If it's worth the additional amount that it takes to bump up to that next level, then you do it. So nothing new.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. We have one more slide here. Ahmad, do you want to take this one?
Okay. So this is a slide I actually bring up when I do a lot of my trainings, right? When I go in and talk to organizations, I say, I give them a line and I say, put this line where you want to have your team, how you want to organize your teams. So one of the things a lot of organizations face is they have a constraint with data engineers, right? Finding a good data engineer is hard. They're expensive, and you don't have the ability to go out and just add an unlimited amount of data engineers to increase productivity, right? So, where Power BI introduces sort of some of those data engineering capabilities like ETL processes, even if it is through Power Query, the ability to do some basic sort of, engineering tasks, it kind of bridges the gap where now you don't need to have as many data engineers. You can have more of these BI developers in between. So it comes down to kind of like how the team wants to organize their resources. What do they want to have their people focusing on, right? And where do they want to, sort of create that distinction between those two roles? And I think more and more, like with Fabric or Databricks or Snowflake, whatever that is, I think the BI developer and the data engineer are not becoming that distinct anymore. There's a lot more commonality between them and synchronicity in sort of the roles that they have. So I think Fabric just provides, it alleviates that burden of having to have a huge data engineering team, where now you can rely on your BI developers to do data basic sort of or intermediate level data engineering tasks. So
I fully agree. Well, that's the end of our slides. So I'll go ahead and we can kill my screen share here.
Absolutely. Let me pop that off. There we go. I almost like the idea of, let me go back to here. There we go. Like you can kind of combine an analyst and engineer. So you can have an engineerist.
Yes.
Kind of a midway between the two of them. Because some companies have engineers that come over with it, but I feel like most Fabric web stores are the analysts that kind of start to become an engineer, just because they're learning more of the Fabric stuff. So they're mostly an analyst with a little bit of engineering sprinkled in there.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, like the semantic model is where the data engineer and the developer, the BI developer, sort of meet, right? So you have all this upstream stuff that's happening, and now you have sort of the downstream pieces. So the semantic model now becomes so much more integrated into the whole ecosystem that Fabric presents. So
It's also,
And I'll
I
mention
think
for
that-
anybody in the
go
chat
ahead.
too, just for Donald and a few others, as we're getting into the like last 10, 15 minutes or so, if you have any remaining questions, put them in the chat, start with a Q, and then we'll discuss them on screen. Go ahead,
Yeah,
James.
we always do our on a show, the drill down. We have a section at the end called direct query, which is just ask us any questions you
Nice.
have. Yep, and so yeah, that's we're in that section now. I think that one of the things that really sort of bridges that gap between the data engineer and the data analyst is the fact now that there's these things like semantic link labs where you can kind of like take a notebook and have it start doing things with semantic models and stuff like, okay, let's maybe have a notebook that goes in and say like uses Copilot to help generate some like preliminary descriptions for all of the measures and columns and things that we've got in our model. And then that's something that a data engineer can help a data analyst do. And then they can say, all right, let's go through this and actually make sure these definitions are actually what they ought to be. Maybe augment them a little bit with oh, here's the actual business justification for this being this way or whatever, that sort of thing. So I think that's a great opportunity for breaking down the barriers between those silos in a business and getting a data analyst and a data engineer working together collaboratively on a project where they're helping each other. And this is again one of those things I've talked about in some of my other presentations about collaboration across job responsibilities and in between different departments. The more you can do that, the more you build those interpersonal relationships that come with a collaborative project when you're working together.
Yep.
The more quickly that things can get done in the future, because you build that camaraderie between people where they trust each other, they understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and it's easier to get to a working solution when you know who you're working with and you know how you can rely on them to help you get what you need done.
Certainly.
When I think to even pair on that and to add to the idea of kind of like the engineers that step into there, I think one thing that is not a new role, but a role that's even more important now with specifically Fabric is the like an actual, like I call it like the data platform architect. Just because everything is like, there's more and more options to centralize stuff. So I think it's even more important because previously, like you wanted to avoid data siloing, and like, yes, you had like a model architect and to a degree trying to figure out like just what shared resources are needed for the company. But to a degree, like a seasoned data analyst could architect a couple of shared models. But now, when you have SQL databases, data warehouses, lakehouses, engineer, all that other stuff. I even outside of and above an engineer is for companies big enough is either having an architect or outsourcing for like architectural guidance, like getting all those pieces in play, because it's always a matter of time and cost saving, right? You can have an F64 or maybe you have an F32 if it was engineered correctly and like optimized, for a smaller environment. So that's that last little piece that I would like put in that little hierarchy is that new world of data architect, which really does actually like come into play now that for people building a full Fabric ecosystem.
I 100% agree.
I'll have a question to both of you. So of all the hot takes either discussed or not discussed so far, what is each of yours like personal favorite hot take or stance on one of those, like a hill that you die on, so to speak, when it comes to hot takes? I'll go to you first, James, and then to you, Ahmed.
Oh boy. I mean, I guess the hot take that we have is that Power BI belongs with Fabric and vice versa. And that sort of encompasses everything we've been talking about today. But that's the one that I think is that's the important takeaway from my perspective anyway. Is that we are that you're not locked into anything. If you're using Power BI and you've been using it the way you've been using it, nothing's stopping you from doing that. Going forward. And if you you're like what Greg mentioned earlier, it's not even going to cost more. If you sign up for a year at a time with an FSKU, you're not even going to pay any more than you were before. So,
Yep.
I guess that maybe that's my my favorite hot take for today is like, hey, look, this isn't going to cost you anymore. Just if you like things the way they are, don't touch it. Just switch from a P1 to an F64 and don't do anything differently.
I think to me, like the biggest thing too is like this, maybe the steep learning curve, right? I think Nothing. I think it's sort of part of the role of an analyst or developer that you're constantly learning new things. That's just the way that you stay relevant and you stay sort of competitive in this ever growing ecosystem that we're part of. So it's citing saying that Fabric is just going to be a lot for us to learn, and now we have to learn Python and we have to learn PySpark and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just part of the nature of being a BI developer. Is you're going to have to learn new skills and pick up things along the way. I mean, Git integration was like a foreign topic for me for not too long ago, and now it's become like second nature. It's how I manage my workflow through everything I do. So I think it's an opportunity to expand your horizons and get out of sort of your comfort zone. I see that as more of an opportunity than sort of a deficiency.
Yeah, learning new technical skills, again, nothing
Yeah.
new. Go back just a few years. DAX was new. People had to learn DAX. Go back a few years before that.
More
MDX
than a
was
few
new,
years.
You had to
but
learn
yeah.
MDX. Yeah, but what I'm getting at is that, like, it used to be when you were a SQL
Yeah.
developer, back when, say, for instance, when SSRS came out, it was SQL. That was all you had, right? Then they
Sure.
added MDX, and then you added, like, so it's we've always had to learn new things. That's never.
Well,
been
to be fair,
a,
at least with
right?
Power with Fabric, is there's not really new languages that have been built for it. It's inherited
Yeah,
and streamlined a bunch of other
that's
stuff.
made from whole cloth, for sure. Yeah, it's
Yep.
it's a language that's been used elsewhere forever. So it's in a way, it's actually opening up things to because you might have somebody who has a lot of background in Python, but they could never use it in Power BI, but now they actually can, because and that actually describes me a little bit. I've done quite a bit of stuff with Python, but until recently, I couldn't really use it in Power BI. I mean, I could use it for data transformation, but only if I was using a personal data gateway, and it was janky. Now there's all kinds of cool stuff I can do with Python and Fabric. So
Certainly.
Exactly. I'm still Fabric. Well, Python's been a bit like VBA with me. I've learned just enough to need to use it in the pipelines and other stuff that have been required by clients, but it's still a new language for me as a person who came from a BI, very much Power BI universe. But I am familiarizing myself with it with notebooks for sure, because it's one of those like I guess I could spend a little time familiarizing myself with Fabric just a wee bit. Those are, I think, good perspectives on the two of them. But I think to your point, Ahmed, like like you can crawl before walking and before running. When it comes to Fabric items, like most people are not just going to go from making a Power BI model immediately to doing a data engineering project. Like they're probably going to do something in between. Even like later, this year at one of the conferences sessions that Steve and I have been shopping around is essentially like you're building your first medallion architecture in Fabric. Like, what would that look like if you had just had a 3-stage process of data transformation, bronze, silver, and gold, and just easy peasy baby step kind of things, and like little low to no code options, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is not a swimming pool of a uniform depth across the whole thing. It's more like the ocean, where you can just go out there on the beach, you can dip your toes in, you can see how it feels, you can go out a little further, you can start doing some body surfing, and eventually work your way on up to surfing Mavericks. So whatever it takes. It's just whatever amount you're comfortable with, and whatever amount the business actually needs to get the job done. That's how much you can do it. Like you were saying, Reed, you've been learning just enough Python to do the things you need, but you don't need to go any deeper than that, right? So I think that applies to the whole Fabric ecosystem, to any skill. Like you don't have to learn every single thing about every single object in like most organizations. Probably at least at first aren't going to have a need for instance, real-time intelligence, right? But there are some organizations that are going to need that, and they're going to go diving straight into that, and it's good for them. But guess what? If you don't need it, you don't have to use it.
Yeah, definitely.
The last thing I would just say on that too is, if you are trying to ever learn a new tool, just make sure you put time on your calendar each week for that. Like literally schedule a meeting with yourself for like an hour, and that is meant to learn. Because I think most of us have learned the hard way that if you keep thinking, I'll find time, you won't. Your calendar will find a way to fill itself up, or you'll find yourself a way to get busy. So schedule some, even if it's 30 minutes, like a little bit of dedicated time where nothing else can take up that time on your personal or work calendar, if possible.
There's actually a whole movement called deep work, which is where you block off time on your calendar, whether it's every day, whether it's every other day. You're just blocking time for yourself every on a recurring basis, where you're putting that time in your calendar. You're going to spend that time either working heads down on a project that needs to be done quickly, or on you know, like you said, advancing your skill set. If you don't have any projects that have a looming deadline, if you have a life that's that nice, I suppose.
Exactly.
You gotta make it. You gotta make it so that people don't give you those looming deadlines so much.
Right.
It's a creative process. It's like you're trying to rush someone who's trying to do art. You know, like it's just like it's not gonna end well. So yeah.
1000%.
Yeah.
All right. Other than the hot takes, any other closing remarks or anything else you'd like to give away as either thoughts, any links or resources as well for people to go check out as we're wrapping up?
Yeah.
I think all of our links are already in the video description, so I encourage people
down below.
to follow our page on LinkedIn. We have the Drill Down with Ahmad and James on LinkedIn, and we've got, of course, our little video player site that I set up on GitHub, so that any of our previous sessions, you can just watch any of them right from there. So yeah, and of course, reach out to us and connect with us on LinkedIn individually as well.
Sure. And if anyone is going to be at the Fabric conference, I'm going to be there. I have a session on Wednesday next week on a framework for UI and UX design for Power BI. So if anyone's interested in learning about designing effective visualizations in Power BI dashboards, swing by. We've got over 150 attendees registered right now, so I think it's going to be a big session. Looking forward to meeting people. Yeah.
Yep. And Ahmed's a great presenter as well. I'll say that, the very first live stream that I did with Ahmed, I was like, oh my gosh, it was great having someone that comfortable speaking and just kind of extemporaneously throwing extra points in there. So, I mean, if you enjoy a well done presentation, I encourage you to check his session out.
No, thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Good luck at the conference next week. Have fun. Say hi to all the people from the MVP Summit for me, and I'll hopefully see you there next year.
Yeah, sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right.
Thank you so much to the two of you for coming on for this.
Thanks for having us.
This has been fun. I'm sure I'll have you guys back on, either together or separately at some point as well in the future. With that, then, everyone else, have a great Thursday, and I'll see you online next week.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
All right.
Take
Cheers.
care.